Okay, guys, I am so excited to welcome this first expert, Aliénor Salmon, who is a writer, researcher, and consultant who has traveled the world studying happiness, education, and social and emotional development for UNESCO, among other international organizations. She's written a fabulous book, Finding Rhythm. She created and teaches Mindful Latin Flow, which is a unique mindful movement class based on Latin rhythms that I've taken, and it was fantastic. And she has also founded the School of Happiness, which is a global community where she hosts personal development workshops. And I've actually had the pleasure to speak at, which was a wonderful and welcoming community. And I just want to say thank you so much for being here. How you feeling?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm feeling really good. I really enjoyed taking some deep breaths with you and connecting.
Yes, I like to start all the podcasts breathing with my guests, hand on the heart, just to like get a little connected. But I am so incredibly happy. And when I was thinking about, I'm always thinking about who to bring on the podcast. And you are one of the people at the top of my list always. We met last summer when I was coming through Lisbon through a friend, and I immediately just found what you were doing, what you stood for, incredibly exciting and powerful. And I feel like we have similar missions, right? Through the body, through health, through wellness, I really try to get people connected to themselves, finding joy and happiness, really creating authentic lives for themselves. And you're someone who studies happiness and empowers people. And we now know how much happiness affects our physical health, right? It is so incredibly important. So the idea of having you come on here, share your really fantastic and unique journey, as well as some tips on happiness, was really exciting to me. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to share more.
So let's jump in. I'd love for you to you've had such a cool journey up into this point, and let's just dive in. So start wherever you'd want, but I'd love to hear, the long version, maybe not like the super long, but I want to hear about your time in Asia. I want to hear about the book. I want to hear about how the School of Happiness came about. So whatever you feel like is important, we're all ears.
So how about I take you back to where it all started?
Yes.
I think that's going to be something that many people can relate to. I had done everything right. I had studied, I had worked towards a career in the UN, which for me was the pinnacle of success. It was my absolute dream for at least 7 years to get into the UN, and I had finally made it. And not only that, but I was working on such a beautiful mission for the reform of education, which, as we know, the future of society depends on what we learn in school, right? And especially now when things are changing so fast, the jobs that people who are studying now will do don't even exist yet. So imagine what a noble mission to work specifically on education for peace and social and emotional development. And then comes my dream project on happiness. So this is back in 2014, and I start to study happiness and really start diving deep into it. And over the course of, let's say, a year, I start studying happiness more and more. And then after about 6 months, I lose my boss, who disappears. Then I fall in love for the first time and I get ghosted. And then my grandfather, my father figure, dies. So I lost 3 men who were really important to me in the space of just 6 months. And here I am studying happiness, writing about happiness, talking about happiness. And yet I am so incredibly sad and heartbroken. On top of that, I'm starting to experience the first signs of burnout. I feel like I'm pushing myself beyond what my body and my mind is even kind of any resources that I have. And it comes to this moment of really of exhaustion and grief and sadness, which, by the way, are all negative emotions that I think are completely underrated, because sometimes your greatest sadness is about to give you your greatest happiness.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I always talk about this, right? Like they are as important, and you wouldn't feel the high highs if you couldn't experience the low lows.
Absolutely. And the low lows have great lessons in them.
Always.
This was probably one of the lowest moments, if not the lowest moment of my life. And it actually forced me to go and reflect. What would make me happy? What would bring me joy? what would stop me feeling so numb? I just want to feel alive again. I just want this spark to come back into my heart. I did everything right, and yet I'm not happy.
Oh, I couldn't relate more. I literally had that, you know what I mean? I was like 14 years an actor. I'm like, this is the career I wanted. This is the husband I wanted. This is the life I wanted. What's wrong? Why am I not happy? And like, hats off to you, because so many people, and me, I guess, right? So many people stay in that. And here you are being like, I got to pivot.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly have to say, I feel like I get too much credit for, of course, I would consider myself very brave. I take risks, but I sometimes feel I get too much credit for having pivoted and taken that risk, because honestly, when people ask me what propelled you, how did you manage to find strength to take that step? And it was just the level of sadness. I would have done anything to not experience that pain, that grief, that sense of loss or numbness that I had inside of me. And so I actually took a moment to close my eyes and listen to my heart, because we're so often in the mind, right? And I just started thinking, what would this look like for me? What would this joy or this life look like? And I started seeing myself, first of all, speaking Spanish. Then I saw myself outside.
And did you already speak Spanish fluently at this point? Okay.
Yeah. And just for context, I learned Spanish as a teenager when I was 14. So it was a language that was neither associated to my studies or society or my family, because I'm bilingual in English, French. So French is the language of my family. English is the language of studies and work, but Spanish was the language where I was just me.
Oh, I love that. I love that distinction.
Absolutely. And so, because I never used it in any of the other contexts where there were social expectations or cultural expectations put on me, this was the language where it was just my own expectations of me in terms of what would bring me joy and happiness. And so I saw myself speaking Spanish. I saw myself outside in the street, completely liberated from my desk. I saw myself laughing. I saw myself with people connecting. And then it just started to all make sense. I was in the streets of Havana dancing and having the time of my life, and I couldn't feel more free or alive. And that's when I turned to my friend, and the book Finding Rhythm starts with this. And I said to her, you know what? If I could do anything, I would just take time off and learn how to dance in Latin America. And this is all hypothetical at this point. But then she says to me, well, why don't you? And I'm like, no, come on. Like, she said, well, actually, you could. And it's incredible, because our conversation had been around, what would you do if you could do anything without the limit of time or money? And every excuse that I gave her was like, well, I can't take time off. Oh, I don't have enough money for this trip. But then when I actually started thinking about how to make it happen, I realized that it was totally doable. It just required quitting my job, which is something absolutely terrifying, and saving for about a year.
I mean, the fact that I just think it's amazing, right? Because, well, especially growing up in the United States, there's such pressure around like finding a career, staying, working, having a family, doing this, like the thing that everyone else is doing. The idea of like having this career that you had really dreamed of and accomplished, and being like, okay, I'm just going to throw it out the window and go dance, is, to me, so, I like, you were talking about, I was starting to get goosebumps. Like, that's so incredibly brave and exciting. And I talk so much with my work and my clients around, the head versus heart, right? Your brain trying to keep you small and fear-based thoughts, and trying to control, trying to protect you, but your heart or your gut or your body being the one that's like really trying to whisper like what the beautiful next step is. And so many people spend their entire lives never listening to that. And the fact that you did this in the most like beautiful and kind of extreme way it's just really cool and really inspiring. Okay. So you're like, I'm going to do this. Fuck it. I'm going to go dance in Cuba. And you saved for a year, and then here you go. And what happens?
So before I go on to the next part of the journey, I just want to speak to some of the reasons why people don't listen to this, because to listen to their mind, because I think it's really important. Disclaimer, even though I did set off on this adventure dancing around the world, I was absolutely terrified. And what I was probably most afraid of was the judgment that I would have from others, including my colleagues of, here I am facilitating a ministerial conference where people take me seriously. And now I just want to go and dance. Will I ever get a job again? Like, will anyone ever hire me? Like, will anyone take me seriously? And for anyone out there who is thinking or has been dreaming of something that they really want to do, and their biggest fear is the judgment of others, I can tell you this right away. I kept my journey a secret for months. And even after I left, I told people it was to experience living in other countries. I was so ashamed. And why was I? I was ashamed to admit or to share that I was simply following my heart and following a passion and something that was true to me. And you know what reaction I got from every single one of my serious colleagues at the UN? They all congratulated me, and they all wished that they had done the same thing. So if anyone out there is worrying about the judgment of others, believe me, they want to be doing it themselves too. And if anything, you will get respect and admiration for it, because following your heart is absolutely priceless. And it's a journey that has completely changed my life.
Oh, I love that. That is such great advice. And if we want to bring it back full circle, right? Like the more you really connect to your body, your heart, your desires, the easier it is to be effortlessly healthy, right? Because happiness affects our physical body. And when we're doing things that really align to us, it's just so much easier to continue to stay on that path of physical and mental health.
Yeah. And it's interesting how your body gives you signals when something is right and something is wrong. And so often we ignore those signals because we think, no, I can't listen to my body. It's all about the should, what I should do, what I should think, rather than, well, how do I feel? And I think that my journey, if anything, is a big reminder to people to follow how you feel, because that's your truth, ultimately.
100%. And this is why you need to be on this podcast. That's exactly what I say too. Like that, you're the only one who knows, right? Like your life is this unique and special and beautiful thing that is just for you. And you're the only one that has the map to all the treasures. So you better sit there and learn how to listen and trust it. Otherwise you're not going to get there, and you wake up at 50 and be like, what? I'm in this cubicle? What happened?
Absolutely. And I think that so often people look for the answers outside of themselves. They turn to different gurus, different experts. And of course, it's wonderful to be guided. We all have our mentors. We ourselves are mentors. But the best person to tell you and to guide you in your life choices is yourself. And sometimes it does take a journey of getting lost before you can find yourself, in the way that it was for me. So in this journey, I mean, originally I thought I would take a month off and learn tango in Buenos Aires. But then I started thinking, and I was like, but I've just taken a few bachata lessons. And, I was a beginner in Latin dance at 30 years old. I had no formal dance background. I wasn't good at it. And some people said to me, but do you know how to dance? And I'm like, no, but I'm not doing this to be good at it. I'm doing it to enjoy it. And it's, again, interesting how people are like, to enjoy something, really, not for your professional development or something that's going to advance your career. And instead, I just followed what was exciting and what was joyful for me. And I'd taken these bachata classes, and I thought, okay, well, bachata's from the Dominican Republic. I'd really like to go there. And then I was like, hold on, I have Buenos Aires, I have Dominican Republic. Oh, but I've always wanted to go to Rio Carnival. Okay, let's add Brazil. Then I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do this Latin American dance journey, I have to learn salsa. But where? New York, Cuba, Colombia, Puerto Rico, maybe all of them. So I went to all of them.
I love it.
And then a really good friend of mine who's Mexican, said, but you have to go to Mexico. And I'm like, oh, would that be offensive if I didn't add it? And I thought, well, what can I dance? So she ends up sending me the national dance in Mexico, which is called the Mexican hat dance, or the jarabe tapatio. And little did I know that along this journey, I would learn 18 dances in 8 countries in just 10 months, when originally I just thought of taking a month off and learning one. It was never in my plans. But I let myself be completely carried away by this journey. Of course, there was planning involved, but I was open. And I think that along the way, I was looking for signs. I was looking for people to guide me into the right direction. And of course, they convinced me to learn a whole bunch of extra dances that I'd never planned to learn. And as a result of that, I saw happiness through their eyes. By holding the hands of a stranger, looking into their eyes and connecting on such a deep level was just so special in a world that has become so lonely and so disconnected. So in a way, I found such a great sense of humanity from this journey that was beyond anything I could have expected. And I had to make mistakes. Learning is finding your way is about failing. I was terrible at so many of these dances. I failed over and over and over again, but I didn't give up. And the thing that I think is really interesting is I've noticed people are so scared about how they're perceived, how they come across. Now think of something really terrifying. Dancing in front of people you don't know, like in the street. Some people wouldn't even be able to think of that. And I can promise you that this journey and learning how to dance in general removes so much fear of the judgment of others.
That's it. Honestly, all of that you were talking about too, about connecting to people and travel, and like, it's so incredibly beautiful. And like, they're like the dance alone, right? Like you being so brave to go and I'm going to try all these new things. I'm going to fail. I'm going to be very vulnerable in front of people and strangers. Amazing. But just going and connecting with cultures like that you've never connected with, like what that does to expand your experience of, empathy and everything, right? Your understanding of who you are in the planet and other people and how we are connected. It's just so incredibly beautiful and so important. Travel is so incredibly important, I think, if you can do it, right? For expansion and learning. And the fact that here you are, and I found this because I spent a bunch of time traveling last summer by myself. I don't know. It just felt like the more you get to experience other cultures and the more you find yourself in situations where maybe you don't actually know what's going on, or you don't speak the language very well, or, you are trying something new. So you're a little bit vulnerable. The more I just started to see how beautiful most humans are and how they want to connect and they want to help. And I think that's such a big thing I always take away from travel. And it sounds like you did too. And obviously it expanded, your experience of the planet and yourself in such a beautiful way.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's a reason why so many people talk about travel as a way to not just expand your horizons, but get used to doing things differently. So with the science of happiness, all the research and science on creativity, if you look at even the scientific definition of creativity is thinking or doing things in new and unusual ways. You're creating new neural pathways every time that you do something differently. So I can't already tell you the brain benefits of dance because that's a whole long conversation. But just the fact of going in a new culture and eating a completely different breakfast and seeing someone smile for reasons that are different than your own. What I think was so incredibly humbling about my journey is I wasn't dancing with expats and digital nomads. I was dancing with locals. And I love to share the example. In Mexico, for instance, I really wanted to learn the traditional dances. And of course, no digital nomads and expats care about that. So here I am going into this neighborhood that apparently I shouldn't have been in, signing up to adult beginner classes. And most adult beginners were retired. So they were much older than me. And there are so many reasons why this is important. One, I was connecting with people of a completely different generation. So people in their 60s and 70s who had completely different, so much wisdom, also a different experience and perspective on life. They were from a completely different background, far away from the lattes and posh dogs that you see in Lisbon. Their daily struggles were different. Their daily happiness was also different. But I was learning from them what that looked like. And I think there's something so beautiful in opening our mind. And again, one of the criteria for becoming more creative is openness to new experiences and new ways of thinking is, okay, what does happiness mean to this person? And maybe I'll just try it, because that's not what I usually do. And in the end, I felt such a beautiful connection to this group of I call them my abuelitos, like my grandparents,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
grandparents. And I ended up dancing on stage with them in front of 1,000 people in
What?
traditional dress. And here I am, the only foreigner. I had to learn a song in Zapoteco, which is an indigenous language from Oaxaca. And I remember this moment where one of my favorite people from the school, his name was Gonzalo, and a lot of people who have read Finding Rhythm love him because he's just such a warm grandfather figure. And while we were on stage, we had to do this dance balancing a clay doll on our head. And I was like, it's going to fall off. It's going to fall off. Anyway, I just about survived. And then at the end, we sing this song in an indigenous language. And for some reason, I'd focused so much in memorizing that it didn't even dawn on me that it wasn't in Spanish until I was on stage. And that's when I thought, hold on, I'm singing in a language I don't know. And in that moment, Gonzalo, who was in the row in front of me, turns around and just gives me a thumbs up.
Oh.
And this was the moment where I thought, I could not be more alive than I am right now.
I love that story so much. And it makes me think too, like here a year prior, 2 years prior, had lost these three, men that were so important to you. And here along your journey, there are people kind of showing up and standing in that place, which is so beautiful. And I like what you just said about feeling alive too. And I think that's the new experiences and travel, both of those things truly make you feel alive and really force you to be present. And like, that's where happiness is, right? That's where joy is. That's where creativity is in this moment. So the more opportunity you have to be present, the more you can experience really powerful, positive emotions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, if you think of what we're going to reflect back on at the end of our lives, it's going to be the moment that we felt completely present, that we were completely alive. And it's not about taking a trip around the world. It could just be a moment that an embrace that you had with someone you loved,
Mm-hmm.
where that felt so deep and so right. It could be a smile that someone gave you. It could be a walk that you took, or the way that the sun was shining through the leaves that day. These are small ways in which we can feel completely alive.
I have a question for you. This made me think of something. So yeah, I sort of blew my life up at around right before I turned 36, where it was like, whoa, everything is not really working anymore. I'm going to try all these other things. I'm going to leave this relationship and this career that I had, and essentially go from living this life that I had created in my mind, what I thought I wanted, what I thought I should be doing, right? What other people around me were doing, and completely pivoting to, because I didn't know. And, you at least had this vision, right? Of like, ooh, I want to dance. I was like, I don't even know. Like, I've created this whole life and I did all the things. And here I am. I have no idea what to do. And I felt like I jumped off this huge cliff and started navigating from my heart, right? From my body. And since that moment, and I remember I promised myself, I would listen to my body and I would no longer make any fear-based decisions if I could, right? Mm-hmm. Those were the only two things I really promised myself. And then I was like, okay, I'm just going to go on this ride. I have that, I guess it's about to be, 4 years of my life has felt like 10, right? And in a good way, right? Where it feels like time stretched out and I have more moments of feeling joy and alive and present than I think I did in so many years before that. Did you kind of have that experience where on some level here you were going through the motions and then you're like, I'm pivoting from my head to my heart? What was your experience? Like, what is your experience of life pre and post that?
I really want to pick up on what you said about the notion of time, because I think time can feel slower or faster depending on how you're living. You could have months that feel like they went by like this in a week because you were cramming in so much. That 1 year of my life, I really look back and think I lived so much that I am, I'm good. I don't have any regrets now, really. And I can give a very specific example of how time feels longer. So the country number 3 was Cuba. Mm-hmm. And in Cuba at the time, you really couldn't access internet that much unless you bought this scratch card and went to a hotel, but it's counted by the minute. So you're intentionally going to use the internet for half an hour, maybe at the end of every day. But for the rest of the day, imagine your life without being online.
It kind of sounds great.
It's amazing.
I mean, terrifying and also wonderful.
It's amazing because people connect with each other.
Yeah.
People are living fully and expressing themselves. But also, the 1 week I spent there, and it's interesting because if you see the length of the chapters of my book, Cuba is actually one of the longer chapters, even though it was only 10 days.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, time it is really fascinating how it stretches depending on what we're doing.
Because I was fully present.
Mhm.
And Cuba was the one country I had been to before. And I actually remembered quite a lot of the streets because when we're using Google Maps, and I think this is a good analogy for life in general, when
Mhm.
you use Google Maps and then you don't remember how to get there on your own afterwards. But when you're forced to figure out the way, so imagine this is your map of life. When you're forced to figure this out by yourself, that's how your memory stores it. So imagine if we lived life off Google Maps, off automation, off assistance from technology, and more guided from the real compass, which is our heart.
I absolutely. I mean, it's so incredibly powerful. Sorry, someone called me. I thought that was on mute. I was like, what is happening right now? But you're right. You're right. And like here moving to, not being in Lisbon very long, I have these moments where, well, I lost my phone, right? And I was having to navigate for a little while without it. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have to pay attention to my surroundings. And all of a sudden I'm not looking here, but I'm not looking down at my phone. I'm looking up and out, and I'm connecting with people more, and I'm seeing things that I'm not normally seeing. And it is forcing you to use your brain and be present in other ways. And it's unbelievable what they talk about in terms of neuroscience and longevity, right? The more we are building those new neural pathways, the longer we live with a really sharp brain. So this is something we really want to be cultivating. But that's such a beautiful experience to have had, right? Because probably you wouldn't have chosen to, okay, I'm just going to live without the internet for a little while, right? Like this has happened to you. And what a beautiful thing to take away from that, right? So, okay, you have these 18 months. Obviously, it's transformational. How did it become a book?
So I never intended to actually write a book. I really just wanted to not feel pain and to not feel sad. And I thought that by dancing, I would find joy again. And actually, the same Mexican friend of mine, so shout out to Ariana. I'm so grateful to her because she was like, she's got a communications background. She was like, but you have to document this. It's so fascinating. I'm like, really? But who cares about my story? I just want to go and dance. I really don't, I don't feel the need. And I didn't even have an Instagram account. She was like, you need to open an Instagram account. I was like, fine, I'll open an Instagram to share photos with my friends. And that's why I started my Instagram Bailando Journey. So Bailando means dancing in Spanish. And it was also a very popular song by Enrique Iglesias and Donna in the year 2016, which is the year that I embarked on that journey. So I basically named my entire life project after an Enrique Iglesias song. Like I always have fun saying that. And so she said, you need to start an Instagram and maybe there could be some journalism and some writing. And then at her leaving party, this is in Bangkok, Thailand, where I was living at the time, she said, look, there's someone you really need to meet. And his name is Joe Cummings. He is the author of the first ever Lonely Planet.
Oh my gosh.
He's been an incredible travel writer for so many magazines. He's been an actor. He's actually just in a big Thai movie that came out where he plays a priest.
How funny.
And he has been he accompanied Anthony Bourdain during the episodes that were filmed in Thailand. He's been a personal guide to Mick Jagger and Aerosmith. The guy is basically the rock and roll star of travel writing. And so here he is at this party, and she literally pushes me into him and says, tell him about your project. So I'm like, I'm going to quit my job and dance in Latin America for like a year. He's like, you should write a book about that. And I was like, me, a book? Really? And he said, well, do you know how to write? And I said, well, I write for a living. Like I write, like, but it didn't make sense in my mind because I'd been writing all these research papers and reports and policy briefs and articles for UNESCO. And then I was like, hold on, I do write for a living.
I love it. Like, wait a minute.
Policy stuff, like how, like writing a book, really? He was like, and he just said, you can write a book. It was that simple. And this man was my mirror, because when I was a child, I learned to read very, very young. I'm an only child, so for me, books were my world.
Woo, only child club, same thing. Oh my God, all I did was read as a kid.
So I had this incredible imagination, and I created my own stories. And I always had this romantic vision of myself becoming a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, it had never clicked that that could be possible until somebody else just told me that it could be. So I think we should never underestimate the power that we have to serve as the mirror for others and to show them what they are capable of, because so often we don't see that in ourselves. We don't think we're capable. And I am forever grateful to him, because I don't know how it hadn't seemed obvious to me, as someone who loves writing, is good at it, always wanted to be a writer as a child, was told don't study English literature at university or never make any money. So I studied politics and international relations instead.
Well, I studied English literature, and that was true for a little while for me.
But in the end, it was a full circle moment, in the sense that I came back to the passion that I had as a child, both for writing and for dance, because I was kicked out of ballet school as a child for being too fat.
Oh God. Oh, that's a whole other conversation. It
is a whole other conversation, and it's one that I get into in the book. But it was a way of, okay, now I can go back to dance for the love of dance, for it to bring me joy, not for it to become a source of judgment and basically torture and humiliation. So so when he told me that, I thought, okay, how does one write a book? So I'm like, okay, I'll think about
can we put a pin in that for 1 second? Just curious, between your mindful Latin flow, which we can get into at the end, your class, and this dancing journey, did it change your relationship to your body at all? Spending all this time dancing?
Oh, completely. And
I would think
we can get into this now. So every chapter of the book is after a country. So it starts with the first chapter is 3 Loves Lost. So it's this experience of loss. Then it goes to Bangkok, where I was living. And then it goes through each of the countries in this journey. So the 8 locations, which is New York, Mexico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Colombia, Brazil, and Argentina. And every single one of those chapters has an underlying theme. And one that it comes out really strongly, especially in the Puerto Rico chapter, but in quite a lot of them, is the relationship with my body and my appearance and my femininity, in a way. And what was so powerful about this journey is, imagine, when I was on this journey, I was probably at my ideal weight. And at 30 years old, I had never worn a crop top in my life, because I was so scared of how people would judge me or look at me, and thought, no, I'm too chubby for a crop top. Well, I can tell you that I did end up buying crop tops in Puerto Rico, because my reggaeton teacher was like, you need to wear a crop top. And it's not just about that. Here is where the lesson really is, and why I recommend to anyone to go to Latin America if you have the chance, or at least go to find a Latin community near you, which I know in the US there is a lot of, because the part that helped me so much with the way I felt about my body was seeing women who were really of all shapes and sizes, tall, short, large, skinny, expressing themselves as beautiful, feminine, and sensual women through dance, regardless of how they look like. Because the issue is, society constantly shows us this cookie cutter version of, if you want to be feminine and beautiful and sensual, you need to look like this.
Yes.
And instead I saw something completely different. And I started realizing that I had some, I don't want to say dysmorphia, but kind of, I would see someone larger than me and think, oh, but she's thin because she's confident. And then I was like, hold on, I'm thinner, but I'm not confident. So in my head, I feel like I'm bigger. Right. So I don't know if that makes sense, but actually what you're seeing with your eyes when you're seeing someone who you perceive as thin is actually confidence. Because when you see someone carry themselves in hot pants and a crop top, dancing to reggaeton like there's no tomorrow, you're like, you do not care what anybody else thinks. And you know what? I want to be like that.
Well, and that's beautiful, right? And that's where it's truly the confidence that is attractive and beautiful more than anything else. People who can own themselves. And there's another thing that I talk about a lot that I really, really believe in, obviously, because I'm in the health and wellness space. We deal with like body and food stuff. And what I found for myself, and I now really teach this and I see this in a lot of my clients is, of course, like we've been talking about, so many cultures teach you to live from the neck up, right? Go outside yourself, read this woman's magazine. This is what we're wearing this season. This is what we're all eating. None of it. It's like, go out, spend money, spend money, spend money. But once you start to get inside, get internal, connect to yourself and start to build a life where you're actually inhabiting in your body, you're present, you're inside, and you're doing things that make you feel good. And you start to build a life based around that. You can't help but like yourself, right? You're happy. You're using your body in ways that bring you joy. It's like, oh, wait, damn. I don't know. I'm kind of great. Like, this feels really good being in here. And I feel like you're such a beautiful embodiment and example of that, right? Like, here you are following in your heart, forcing yourself to get out of your head into your body. You can't learn to dance in your head, right? And having this beautiful transformation. That I love that. I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. And one more thing I'd like to add is moving your body and feeling at ease with the way you move your body around other people creates such an incredible sense of self-acceptance. Because if you think about it, this the way that it feels in the body is almost like this, like there's a break, like there's something holding you back. And it's this fear of, oh no, I can't show myself, because when you dance, you have to be yourself.
Yeah.
You can't be anybody else. You are your own expression. And that's why it scares people so much, because it's not something that they can follow and do in exactly the same way as everyone else.
Well, this makes me, sorry to interrupt. This makes me think of mindful Latin flow and my experience in your class. But before we go into that, what were you going to say before I cut you off?
No, I mean, they're totally related. I think what we're trying to do with mindful Latin flow is kind of, at least my intention is to bring women on a shortcut to that journey.
Well, I found it really, my experience, I've never done, grew up dancing as a kid, but mostly because my mom, like, that's what she liked. Like, I wanted to be on stage, just like being silly. And she was like, go to dance class. And what you do is, like, you really slow down a lot of these moves, right? There's great music and you are really inhabiting your body, but like moving your hips in all these ways. And it was the first time that I was moving in these certain ways where I wasn't drunk or like dancing with a guy or at a wedding or trying to like think about what I look like. Sometimes we're closing our eyes, right? Where it's like, I'm not trying to be sexy or look cool. Here I am just moving my hips. And it was like emotional and it was incredibly empowering. And it felt like this really beautiful meditation in understanding my relationship to movement in my body and my femininity outside of, my sexuality or outside of the male gaze or outside of connection to other person. It's just like, what is it like to embody this meat suit that is mine, and what's my relationship to it? And it was really unique and different. And I think it's a really special thing you've created.
Oh, thank you. That's everything you said is exactly why I created it. And it's so incredibly beautiful to hear your words, because that's exactly what I want people and women to feel, that it's not just to impress men that we are sensual and beautiful in the way that we dance. And it is about inhabiting our body and also finding out what answers are in there. Because every time we move a different part, we're like, okay, what are the answers to big questions in life? And what's another way to find those answers that's not in my mind?
And it brought up a lot of emotions, I felt like, too, right? Right. Taking the sexuality out of it, or like a relationship to, whatever partnership we're looking for, right? And just being in that experience alone. And like, I remember feeling like kind of awkward it was like, oh my God, like, who do I think I am? It brings up a lot of different complicated emotions when you slow down and move your hips, really. It was really fascinating. I felt like I learned a lot about myself.
I love that. And we store so many emotions in the body, especially in the hips. And what I love with Latin rhythms is they are really using a lot in the hips and a lot in the chest. So connecting with the heart, also, you know, if you think about our posture, the way that we are sitting at our computers all day, we're hunched and we're closing our heart to the world.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, you know, I love to come up with new fun things. I have something called a reggaeton meditation, which is basically rolling your shoulders back and pumping your chest. And really just in a very slow, gentle, repetitive movement. It's not about trying to look cool. It's just about connecting with this rhythm, and the way that the beat is in reggaeton, you can almost think of it as your heartbeat. And then you're like, wow, I'm really exposing this vital organ, and I'm not afraid of exposing it. And that's also opening yourself to love, and showing yourself, exposing who you are as a person. And what I think is so special about that is there is so much information in our bodies that we're not
Mm-hmm.
tapping into, because we
Yes.
need to go and explore it. And what I love with dance is it's kind of like having an internal journey through
Mm-hmm.
yourself and seeing, okay, first of all, identifying feelings. What can I
Mm-hmm.
identify inside of myself?
Yep.
Second, how can I process them
Yep.
through movement? And then finally, by processing them, they usually give you a message, and that's when you find release.
Yes. What a beautiful way to put that. I talk about this a lot, right? Right. The only way out is through, with emotions, and you got to, really be in your body. But what a joyful way to do that through dance,
Yeah.
right? Like what? Yeah. I love how you put that. Okay. Let's swing back
Love
around a bit.
through it, right?
Yes. You got to love through it. Love through all that pain.
Absolutely.
Move your body, especially your heart. What you're saying about opening your heart to love and connection. Like, oh, yes, I couldn't agree more. So I want to circle back to the permission, right? And this is what you were touching on before, that this writer gave you at this party, right? Like we're all looking for this permission. And it's so beautiful, because I think we have moments like people will come into our lives and show up like he did and give that to us. But I love, and I want to give everyone here, right, who is listening, permission. You don't wait for someone else. Like give yourself permission when you can, or this is us giving you permission. So here you are having permission to write this book, and you start doing it, and you are, what did that process look like for you? Because I know a lot of people have this dream that you've fully realized.
So first of all, I think absolutely everyone has a book in them. And what's really interesting is that as a social researcher, I really wanted to get into the history and the culture and the facts. And definitely when you read Finding Rhythm, I can promise you that you go on a journey and it becomes your journey. I just had a reader message me today saying, I felt like this was my journey. I felt
Oh,
like I was physically there, because I go into a lot of detail on the history, on the culture, on the way that the places look like. Having said that, I did manage to grab a drink with Joe Cummings before leaving Thailand. And I said, well, so you told me to write a book. So like, how do I do that? And he just said, well, just write down, keep a diary. And he said, the most important is write down how you feel. And I'm like, how I feel? But why does anyone care about that? And he said, because it's your experience. You need
mm,
to document all your feelings. And so I kept that in mind. And on the actual journey, the notes for my book were taken on the iPhone Notes app. So sometimes I was on my phone on the dance floor, and I remember someone like pointing out, like, stop being on your phone. I'm like, but I'm taking down
I'm
notes.
writing a
There's amazing
book.
thing happening right there. But actually, what helped me a lot was documenting through photos and through videos. And the actual writing process took me, let's say, on and off. It happened over the course of maybe 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a bit of a pause, but let's just say that there's a chapter. Argentina and Brazil were written at the beginning of 2020, but they
Mm-hmm.
happened in 2017. 2017.
Mm-hmm.
So even though 3 years had passed, when I went back to those videos and back to those photos, I remembered so much detail. And then the notes helped me remember the smells, the textures, the people. And it was just, I felt like I was reliving the experience all over again. And especially with COVID hitting, I signed my book deal in March 2020. I spent my time in lockdown reliving this journey over and over again. And it was really a gift and a therapy for me, because I laughed and I cried, just from writing and rewriting and re-editing. And there are so many wonderful characters in this journey that will crack you up, or that you'll want them to be your friend. And this is what I love so much about this writing process is, of course, the final result is bringing joy to lots of other people, but I got so much joy from writing it as well.
And that's the reason to do it, truly. That's like the first reason to do it, because you want to, right? And it would be such like a beautiful, joyful, cathartic thing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but if I can't even describe just how much joy I got from writing it. And then what I'm imagining now, or at least from the reviews, which feel free to go and check them out. The reviews do not lie about this book. I feel like I had this kind of light in my heart when I was writing it. And it feels like every time someone reads Finding Rhythm, that light is in their heart too.
Oh, how beautiful. I'm like now picturing this as a movie. Someone pick this up, guys. She needs a movie deal.
Or a musical.
Yeah. Or both.
It's a musical with dance performances.
Oh, hell yeah. Well, either way, there needs to be lots of dance performances. So I would love to transition this into what you're doing now, right? So the School of Happiness, like what a beautiful, I mean, I remember you were talking about this to me in the fall or last summer, and this was an idea. And I was like, I love this. I love everything about this. And it was so beautiful getting to speak and really experience your community a couple of times. It was so fabulous. I'd love to hear about like how we sort of segued into that.
Yes, absolutely. So it's really interesting because the foundation of the School of Happiness is exactly what I studied when I learned about happiness for the first time 10 years ago, and everything that I've learned in the process, which is to embody happiness in your life. So first of all, the School of Happiness is a global community that brings people from San Diego to Sydney, and every month we study a new topic. And those topics are actually mostly taken from the character strengths from the VIA Institute, and these were identified from the person who invented the science of happiness. So Martin Seligman and his colleague Christopher Peterson did an analysis of all world religions and all world philosophies. Already, if you think about the way my dance journey was, I was exploring ways of life, philosophies in different countries, right? They examined all world religions and philosophies and found that what they had in common were these 24 strengths. So we can take this free survey online and you find out what your top 5 are and what your weaker ones are. And according to the science of happiness, and I really like to make things simple and easy to understand, the big takeaway that I got from studying happiness and learning how to teach it to others, because I was looking at education reform and I was doing research on happiness in schools. And so I was thinking, well, how do you teach this to other people? And it's incredible because it's literally finding ways to embed these strengths into content that you are teaching, into your way of being by leading by example. So by working on your own happiness, you are already inevitably spreading it to others.
Oh, I love that.
But also there is a way to use the language behind these strengths as a content creator on social media, as a photographer in the way that you capture your clients, as a DJ by spreading happy music, as a manager in a Big 4 company in the way that you lead your team, as a teacher in the classroom, as a nurse comforting their patients. I cannot think of a single profession that could not benefit from embedding these strengths. And so the idea behind the School of Happiness was every month we're going to devote ourselves to one strength or a happiness related concept that is linked to them somehow. And we're going to learn how to actually practice that strength on ourselves and how to spread it to others. And not only are people seeing incredible results in themselves, but they're seeing better, more fulfilling relationships, better conversations, and it's actually helping them in their jobs as well, or in their role as a leader for happiness, whether you're a parent or a manager or the director of a company and you want a happier vision, a more positive vision. And so to give you an example of what some of these themes are.
Yeah, I was going to ask, please. This is so exciting.
Please take the VIA character strength survey, because I was just at the World Happiness Summit and we were swapping our top 3 strengths like people swap astrological charts. It's so funny. We're like, what's your top 3? What's your big 3? Usually your big 3 is your sun, moon, rising. And we're like,
wait. What are your big 3? What are your big 3?
So big three in astrology or in strengths or in
Oh,
both?
in strength, in the happiness world.
So in the happiness world, my number one is kindness. My number two is gratitude. And my number three is appreciation of beauty and excellence.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. So yes, you were going to get into topics.
So those three are examples of topics.
Yeah, great.
For example, we started the school in October 2022 with the topic of hope. I thought that hope was a really good place to start for happiness because it's the belief in a positive outcome.
Mm-hmm.
That's the scientific definition of hope is I believe the most positive outcome is possible and I will take action towards that. Many people think hope is passive. It's actually all about action. November, we studied gratitude. Last month in March, we did creativity. And this month in April, we're looking at bravery, which is a really great one. So helping people overcome fears and doubts, but using a scientific framework for it. Because according to the science of happiness, even if you work one strength at a time, just a little bit, you will be happier.
So give us some tips. Do you have, a handful of simple tips, your favorite tips around cultivating happiness that people can try at home?
So the first one is take the VIA survey, figure out your top 3 strengths, and then see how you can use them more because that's your zone of genius.
Oh, that's such a great.
So
yeah.
And then within each of those, so what we do in the School of Happiness is I make a list of all the ways you can strengthen that particular strength and actions that you can take in your day to day. So I'm going to give you the example of creativity. Spend time alone in solitude without any distraction, or allow yourself to play and create something just for the sake of creating without looking for a perfect example. That's a way to increase creativity. What's the great side effect of that? It makes you happier. Feel happier and be happier in the long term. Generally, I would say if we step back, and I think that if I had one gift to give to the world for happiness, it would be self-awareness and knowledge. It would be this knowledge of your strengths and your values and your beliefs, because I feel that a lot of what we have done wrong, including myself, is making decisions outside of what is our core identity. We're trying to be someone else, or we're trying to be our job title. Oh, I'm a lawyer. I'm like, no, tell me your top 3 strengths. So this was
love that.
And what was so fun at the World Happiness Summit, also known as WAHASU, I was going around asking all these top experts, like, what's your top 3 strengths? Because that's what it means to value someone. Or even, what's your favorite color? Like, why don't we ask ourselves these kind of questions instead of, so what do you do? Because that's the question that we so often ask people. And I think that once we're very clear on, okay, these are my top 3 strengths, these are my values, this is what I stand for, this is what I refuse and will never stand for, and then see, is your life in alignment with this? Are you saying yes to things that are outside of it or inside of it? It's about, if you think back to the Stoics and the ancient Greeks, it's about living a virtuous life. We're always going to have difficulties in life. There's always going to be, if you think of the middle way and Buddhism, there's always going to be suffering, but it's about building resilience for that suffering and finding a way to deal with more difficult times in life. And what I love with the science of happiness is this approach of strengthening your strengths actually does make you more resilient, because it gives you a toolbox to really fall back on and to use to, maybe something difficult happens and your reaction is not as strong as it could have been. You didn't have that awareness.
Yeah, you are literally backing up everything we do in my programs, everything I do with my clients. Cultivating awareness, understanding who you are and what you want and how you feel about things. That is the only way to stay happy and healthy, right? Like knowing who you are and understanding, like, whoa, I'm treating myself in all these weird ways that maybe don't make sense, or I'm talking to myself in this way that isn't kind, or I have these beliefs around myself that maybe aren't true anymore, or these habits that actually make me feel more tired or more frustrated or bad about myself. So like what you're talking, I love the idea of strengthening your strengths too. It's like understanding where your zone of genius is and not trying to be something you're not, right? Yeah. Like let it be easy, stay in your lane, be more like really, end up becoming more of who you are. And I feel like you led us very naturally to our final question here that I ask everyone. And, it goes along with the title of the podcast, love through it. The idea that, there is that one guarantee in life, that there will be struggles, there will be suffering, right? There will be things that are hard or setbacks, but we always have a choice. We can, suffer through the difficult times, or we can choose to love through them. So, you have all of these beautiful experiences, all of this great research. When life doesn't quite go your way, what's maybe your top thing or your top few things that you do to love through difficult periods of time?
Wow. I dance.
I guess that was obvious, right?
That's a really easy answer. Actually, I've been going through a really tough week, and to share what I did that helped me a lot is I attend every week a tango class online with these amazing teachers in Latin America. And I find that tango is my dance for processing sadness and grief. And it's so rich, or even, how can I say, dancing very slowly by yourself in the same way we do in Mindful Latin Flow.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this so powerful? Because you're allowing time to stop. Mm-hmm. You're breathing. Maybe you close your eyes, you connect to your body, and you allow yourself to move. And when you move, you let those emotions kind of circulate. You identify them, you process them, and you release them. It could be as simple as going outside for a walk with no music, no podcast, no voice notes, no nothing. Just for the sake of, for me, it's really about just being in your body. It could be getting a massage, because when someone is touching your skin, you're like, hold on, all these problems, this cloud of problems are in my head, but I am here. I am here right now in this body, and this body is my home, and this body is safe.
Oh, that is the most beautiful advice. And right, movement helps you process emotions. So of course. And the idea that we are giving permission for people to come back to themselves in such a fun, often joyful way is, I think, really exciting, right? The more tools we have that are fun to lean into, the more we're actually going to use them. So that is such a beautiful piece of advice. Well, it has been such a dream to have this conversation with you. I'm so glad you took the time. Please tell people, what you're up to, where they can find you, how can they get more of the School of Happiness, finding rhythm, all of the things.
So first of all, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I love talking to you, and I'm really grateful that you were part of the School of Happiness as well. So the School of Happiness, you can find at schoolofhappiness.io, but we are becoming very active on LinkedIn. We have a wonderful page. Please do follow it. We're actually creating loads of amazing content at the moment. So because we're very new, it's all going to come out, but it's already getting really, really good, and we're really excited about it. You can find Finding Rhythm anywhere books are sold. So if you want to support your local bookstore, you can order it there. If you want to find it on Amazon, you can also find it there, or Barnes and Noble, or really wherever you find your books. And if you want to find me personally, I am most active on Instagram. My handle is, named after an Enrique Iglesias song, Bailando Journey, Bailando, and then Journey, where I share more about everything I'm doing. And Mindful Latin Flow is coming back.
Yes, I was just going to ask. Tell us, are you doing it in person and online? What's happening?
So I'm hoping to find a way to do both. It's coming back for Saturday, the 29th of April, which is International Dance Day. So this is going to be really, really special.
That is actually also my birthday. How fun.
Amazing. Yeah, so you were born on International Dance Day. Maybe.
Oh, who knew? So the 29th, you'll be doing it in person in Lisbon. In
Lisbon at the Little Yoga Space.
Nice.
And I will hopefully be able to do it online, either at the same time or just beforehand.
Perfect. Well, I know people are going to be really excited to find you, read your book. The School of Happiness is such a fabulous resource, as is, Mindful Latin Flow was one of the more unique. It was like an exercise, meditative, get to know you experience. It was one of the most unique things I've experienced. So I would absolutely encourage people here and online to check it out. Thank you again for sharing your light with the world. You are such an inspiration in terms of someone who just went outside of the box. And I just really get excited when people choose themselves and also choose doing things that make no sense, right? Like
Yeah.
no one would, you're going to go dance around the world and quit your job. Like that's so crazy, but like it has led to all of this beauty. And I always tell people like, there's whatever you love, whatever you're supposed to do, whatever you enjoy doing the most is going to bring all of this beauty into the world and is going to benefit other people. And you're just such a great example of that. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. We must go get dim sum again or something other fabulous to eat now that you're back in Lisbon. And yeah, go check her out, guys. She's amazing.
And just a note that April, we're studying bravery. So if you have a big dream that you've been afraid to pursue, we're going to be looking at how to overcome those fears and actually take the first step in the School of Happiness this month.
Oh, I love that. All right, guys, you heard it. Whatever you're afraid of, go get support. She will absolutely help you realize those dreams. All right. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much.
Sending you love.